Good morning. I'm just going to comment on a video I watched about, it's one of the Dr. Grande videos. It's like a absolutely fabulous type, what's his name, Patsy and Adina scenario about Sandy Hill. Now I didn't know about this case, but it's from the 90s. But yeah, it just sounds like a total classic narcissism situation. And what it got me thinking about was one of those San Vaknin videos. Now, the guy who I mirrored yesterday, he did one about, one of his concepts it was talking about was that it's a evolutionary step, which everything is, isn't it? How can it not be? Because it's in response to things that are happening in the environment. So yeah, but this made me think about that evolutionary step with this case. Because with this, what we're going to get, I mean, in a way, it was survival of the fittest, in a way, in this, under those circumstances, in a narcissistic world. This bird, Princess Vespa herself up a mountain, paid a load of people to take her up the mountain and carry her matching luggage and a hairdryer and all that stuff. And then basically because of all the extra work that was taken to try and sort of facilitate and pick up the pieces and pick up the slack of this Princess Vespa, there were a load of other people died. One of the I think one or two of the guides actually died on Mount Everest, these like really high qualified climbers, because obviously the customer's always right. And that's the thing, that's where the narcissism extends, isn't it? Because it's not just her, is it? You know, they wanted the prestige. They wanted the prestige of being the Everest mountain climbers. They wanted the prestige of having a client base of very high paying, celebrity level idiots to take up the mountain. And we're making a shit ton of money as a result. So it's just, again, this is where, for me, I saw an evolution of how things can evolve, you know, because you've now got a load of people who are then we've got industry upon industry, look at TikTok, making money out of narcissism, because what it is, it's fundamentally people who are vulnerable. We haven't got religion to make as much money out of people. That racket's over and done with, so they've got to find other things. Narcissism will be the next thing that they prey on. Obviously, we've had it all the way through the 80s. So, I mean, we've all grown up being shown adverts as if they were programs, being shown adverts as if it was education. The smoke and mirrors that we've all had to just accept it and learn to live with it and navigate it, even as kids. That person's lying, that person's lying, that person's lying. You just know not to trust that person on the TV because they are selling you something which is going to kill you. And this isn't like paranoia or tinfoil hattedness. This is just the things that people expect you to know. Like, I remember my dad as a young kid saying you've got to read between the lines, because, you know, you do look at the e-begging thing over here, you know, it's like buyer beware. And like, look at fucking what Saggy Mellons' excuse for how she was manipulating and taking advantage of people for all that time knowingly, and going, well, if they're going to do it and they're stupid enough to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to take it. So there's a whole industry and a whole class of people, a whole class of predators of people who are going to be making money out of these vulnerable people. Now, looking at the case study of Dean and even Albert, even Carl, these people, when you look at them, are lacking in lots of ways, aren't they? And they are vulnerable, and they're almost these lost souls, the sort of people who would be snapped up by some cult or other, some organisation or other, the army, whoever, you know, because they are lacking in direction. So here we go. This is where the industry is now getting ramped up, I think, to another degree. Now, we've had it since Transformers, you know what I mean? That in itself, evolution itself is evolving, and that in itself will evolve into something else, in my opinion, and I'm just going to watch that from now on. The way I see it, where this could go evolutionarily, even just in the short term, you've got, you know, such a lot of industry centred around narcissism, because that's the way to make money, that's the way to manipulate people, that's the way to brand people. I mean, they've been working on it for a long time. It's all to do with these advertising campaigns that's definitely put a lot of nails in the coffin about this stuff, rather than the smoke and mirrors. Destabilising people's ideas of what truth is. And then it's like, you know, you can fucking sell anything to anyone then, can't you? And they've been allowed to do that and encouraged to do that since before we were even born. So we've got that to go. But what we're going to end up with now is, look at that. Like, so there we've got Mount Everest, right? So really somewhere that people really shouldn't be going up. in my opinion, unless you're pretty fucking skilled at it. You shouldn't be going up there for a holiday. It's just you can do what you want in my opinion, but like, you know, you ain't going to come down from there if you do. And there isn't anyone looking out for anyone's best interests anymore. Just in this case study, you know, they are just like, yeah, give me the money and I'll help you kill yourself. Like, that's where they're at. So where's the humanity there? Then when it came down to it, they did with humanity, they did want to save people. But like the guy says in the video, every person who he had to save meant that it either put their life at risk or it put someone else in the group at risk because it was that dangerous. And so you've ended up then in a situation where you've got a situation where people who shouldn't be up there are up there, okay? And then that's going to evolve then into, I would imagine, I mean, obviously people are going to be stupid and they're going to have enough money and people are going to do that forever, even though it makes no sense at all. But you're going to end up with people just not going up there anymore. People aren't going to take risks in the end. People just aren't going to do it because there's going to be no safe way to do it. There's going to be no skills. There's going to be no like, oh yeah, you can do this. You can do this. But it's going to take you 20 years. You've got to be a master at this, this and this. But yeah, there's an art to it. Yeah, you can do it. You can do this. But you're just going to have to really, really work towards it. And this is how you do it. There's going to be no one to teach anyone that. It's just going to be like, oh yeah, I'll provide you the service. Download my template. Do this, but go to my seminars, buy my book, subscribe, and all that bullshit. And you can do this. You can go to the top of Everest. Just going to cost you that much money. And it's just like, again with Dean and the situation, when the crunch comes, there's nothing there. There's no reality to any of this. So no one's going to end up going up Everest anymore. None of these explorations, actualizations of things that people want to do, people who really do want to challenge themselves, people who do really want to explore, people who have spent 20 years learning how to climb a fucking mountain, they ain't going to get up there either. That's just my prediction, because what it does is it'll just stop anyone from, there's no real goals, you know. It's just going to get taken over by someone going up there to take a photo for TikTok, or someone going up there and paying someone like Tommy Tallarico, paying someone to do it all, to put the facade in front rather than actually doing it. So what of the real skilled people? What of the people who do want to go up Mount Everest, who have got a reason to go up Mount Everest? Whatever that reason might be, I can't think of money, but you know, I'm willing to admit that there must be a reason for most people. So like, you know, what of those people? What of the people who would have earned a medal in the past? You know, if you're buying it all, and like what happened with that Titanic thing when they all went into supposedly space and all that stuff, you know, what of the reality of that? What of the real, they're doing something for a genuine reason, they're doing something for the betterment of humanity, or the betterment at least of yourself, which will help humanity, instead of it just, I mean, now it's for the betterment of TikTok. The point is, if it is an evolutionary step, and it is survival of the fittest in this narcissistic environment, then what does that mean for us? Because what we saw there was, you know, other people died because they were less narcissistic. So therefore, including the skilled people, including the people who made it so those people can go up the mountain. So now there's so many less people who can go up the mountain. I would argue that's not such a bad thing. But just in general, looking at it evolutionarily, what does that mean then? The skilled people die. The skilled people, still coming from an old world, feel the need to facilitate these rich people. These rich people, having grown up in our world, have a way of being and a consciousness which probably just dictates some form of compliance as well, because they're just used to having yes men around them, and that's just the way this world is set up. So the outcome of that is that the rich people take the skilled people up the mountain and the skilled people die. So that means that less people are going up the mountain. And now that's going to happen, I would imagine. That case probably isn't going to be the same, because obviously it's not always a life-threatening situation, but it's just interesting to me with the evolution how that dynamic is going to work, especially since more and more people coming forward. The ones with the shoutiest voices are the ones with the least awareness. And so the reasons why I think this is relevant to what's been going on with us is because it's similar to the crunch. It's just the crunch, and this is how the crunch can go. And this is when you've got someone who literally, you follow their whatever their story is that they're trying to put across of themselves, rather than the reality, which is right in front of your face, even to the point in this case of people putting themselves at risk until they die, because they are that. Everyone's just that. Well, I suppose at that point you're backed into a corner and you're screwed then, aren't you? How do you get back out of it? But this is going to happen to a lot of people. No, you're not up Mount Everest, but getting screwed and getting backed into corners and not being able to get out of it, because you just go along with it for the ride, because it's a gravy train, and then you realise where you're at. And I think that's similar to what's been happening around here, to be honest. I do think there have been some people who've been led up a mountain and left, and they were the more skilled people. They were the people who we were before. They were the real people who actually were interested in this stuff and had a bit of trolling experience and were doing multi-leveled stuff, and then all of a sudden they've all been eradicated. All us lot were obviously rebuilding and stuff, but that's because we've got a drive within us to fight it. If we hadn't, then everyone would have been led up the mountain, and there will have been a couple coming back down again. So in my opinion, it's just a case of, in this one with Dean, he just picked the wrong people, you know what I mean? He picked the wrong people who actually knew each other enough to band together. And so in his case, he thought in some ways he spied out a decent place. He found a place that wasn't driven by money as well, and it had different drives, and that does massively change everything. Because as well, when it comes to drama and stuff like that, there's a bit of nuance here, and less so than there was to start with. But in most of YouTube, you've just got someone somewhere who's making money, not just having a laugh, not just fulfilling their own psychological needs, but there's money on top, and they're wanting to just prolong the Groundhog Day and just keep it going, and just never progress, never learn from it, and as well, they're dragging their audience into it as well. They never learn from it, they never teach them anything. They're in this position where people are all coming together to collaborate with this person under this umbrella of having a stream or something, and what they're doing is manipulating those people to just keep going on a Groundhog Day and another one to make the drama, to make money. And we didn't have that here. So that was an interesting place, and somewhere that obviously was interesting for someone like Dean. I'm not getting on his case on this one, but it's, it was, from his perspective, an interesting place to try and take advantage of. And so I understand that part of it, but when he went after Evil, who is quite a pillar of the community, he made an error of judgment there. And that's why we've still got the drive, because we all stuck together and we had a reason, because we had friendship, we had actual connection. Now, I know it's only online and it's not the same. I know you guys, it's not real life, dog, and it's not, but it is a form of life. And that form of life that we had, we did decide we wanted to fight for it, and there was a reason for that, and that was the human connection. And you don't get that human connection by scaring people into it, by threatening people into it, by coercing them, and by controlling their environment so there's no other option, and where you're all that they see, you're all that they hear, so that they don't see or hear anything else. They don't know which way's up. What effort that takes to do that, when you could actually just be mates with people. You could just, instead of being like, oh, have you got ulterior motives? Are you doing that for that reason? I've seen you on that stream, and getting your minions to do all this stuff, and then sitting there like a spider in the web, grinning to yourself that you've won because you see that person doing that for you, and you see that person doing that for you, and that person's now dancing to the tune of that person. Oh, that's so funny, because that person who they're dancing to the tune of is the person who's dancing to your tune. So isn't that great? But really, when crunch comes, what's that going to do for you? Now, don't get me wrong, I've got some good mates that I consider to be high-level puppet masters, and there is a time and a place for that, in my preference. I know not everyone would agree with that, but for certain scenarios to be highlighted by the art of puppetry, And as we know, puppets has been a thing throughout this entire journey with us from the beginning. Well before any of this, puppets has always been a thing. So I find that interesting as well, because there's so many reasons for that, and that's a psychological thing as well. It's like a whole Conky episode to unpick, and it's just, I haven't got a problem with the puppet mastery per se. It's part of humanity. It's just picking the right situations and for the right reasons. Like for me, like looking at it from my point of view, like my way of doing things, it's all about trolling, and that does involve getting some feedback from people reacting to what you've done, and having a reaction to these things, potentially. But even if they don't react to it, for me, the stuff I do, I just want to put a message across, even though it's massively symbolic and things like that, and most people don't get it. For me, it's good because I just get it out. I just get that message out that I couldn't get across properly before. And so even if it doesn't get heard, it doesn't really matter, because I've done it how I want to do it. But so it's that mixed with trying to get your vengeance, or just having a laugh, in this environment, because these people are funny. There's a bit of lol cow milking and all the different reasons, and I get that, man. You know me, I'm here for that. I don't want to be all on a high horse and saying, oh, where's your puppet master, got you now. It's not that. It's more you've got to, this was like a proper thing. Like, you came into someone's house, basically. You came in and just shit all over the place, and you didn't even do it properly, because we also had, just before you came in, because you utilised, what I'm talking to in this moment in time, groupie, but you utilised a bit of a skirmish that was going on, that was already happening, wasn't it, with someone else who's come in fairly new, and you got that idea to do it, and you hid behind the skirmish, like we've seen you hide behind many situations, many people, many little things, even going and getting them from other people's pasts and stuff like that, to hide behind other people, your own family, you know what I mean? And so it's constantly like that situation. And so in this one, the person who you trying to emulate, the person who you hid behind, was an artist and had something to bring, massively had something to bring, and so was kind of like the opposite of what you tried to do there. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm talking about Slotham here, of course, and you used that because you used it because you knew that Darius was desperate for help, and so there you go, you got him to completely flip on everybody. You did use it, you know what you're doing, and you did use it. But look at the difference, look at where you're at and look at where they're at, and look at the community that was built because of the reason behind the difference. Because I said right at the beginning, there's a natural force at play here of things changing, of things evolving, and molds being broken, and that's important, massively important in this environment. And especially as we're all similar ages and we're all kind of aging at a similar rate, and so we're all going through similar cycles, because we've all been going through similar things, at least online, in the last couple of years, because we've all been doing it with each other. So the reason behind the difference is massive, and that's where, like, all these methods and things like that, I'm not totally against anything straight away. I've got my own personal preferences, artistically and otherwise, obviously, like everybody, but I don't seek to dominate with mine. I'll spout off about my preference, but I don't expect anybody to have my preference, because I don't have anyone else's preference. And it's just one of those things that you just kind of take for granted. It's like in that situation where someone else new came in this case it was Slotham, but someone else coming in new, they see a situation, they want to change it for a reason, they've got their reasons, they could have been slighted by someone, they see a level of control, there was a hell of a lot to be changed about that situation, and so Slotham saw what he wanted to change in that situation and he went for it. Now with Dean, I'd like to know what he wanted to change in that situation that made him do what he did, because his activities and sort of his actions have not been as obvious of any real reason behind them as Slotham's have been. And he's, in Slotham's case, he'll explain his situation, exactly why. Many times, no one's under any illusion as to why and where and what for and all that stuff and the people involved. With Dean, it was the other way around. No one knew why. If you collared him, he didn't give you a reason. It was all personal attacks. Yes, obviously on the other side, you get the personal attacks, but it's like, it's done in an art form. It's a completely, in my opinion, a completely different thing to someone literally just picking on a commenter and just going in on them personally for no reason. And I'm not having a go because obviously it's all done and dusted now, but I'm just trying to compare the two and just see how, like, you know, this changing, this winds of change that comes in, how it can be in different ways, very different ways. And I know I'm biased because I have an artistic preference. So there's that, and I can just put that to one side for a second and just, why do I see that in a preferential light? Because it had substance and the person behind it explained their situation and taught people along the way. I want to know what the priority difference with Dean was to create what he did and to do what he did, and what his priority difference and those differences, how he then explained those to the other people and how they benefited from those differences, how their community was of benefit through those differences. Because I see that in Slotham's. I see a difference. I see it explained. I see people taught. I see people choosing to accept it or not. I see a space where people can debate, and I see a new space that's been created, which I can say that they at least created themselves a space. It's a very empty space, but they did create themselves one. But, you know, this space over on this side has been used. It's a vibrant, like, it's just an absolute beautiful oasis of life compared to the other side. And I want to know why. You know, I can see very strongly why Slotham did what he did and what the pressures were. And he'll tell you if you ask him. And I've asked many of those guys. The only person I ever got a straight answer from isn't here anymore. And Dean felt the need to eavesdrop on that entire conversation because he was so scared. We had to have a set private conversation away from Dean and organise that. Dean still managed to get in there and still had to eavesdrop and try and control the situation. He also tried to blackmail that situation. That's how hard it is to try and get any sort of conversation or real communication with anyone who's connected with Dean in this situation. So it's a very different reason, in my opinion, and very much more hidden than why other people will do their trolling and their craziness and their levels of destruction. I'm not against that, and I'm not against shaking the mat. I suppose it's about a preference and about alignment of your reasons behind it. And I suppose this goes back to the same judgment in error, because in this environment, and Dean wouldn't have known because he came in as a chameleon, and his methods don't include taking the temperature of the room to the extent that he probably needed to in such a nuanced place, because of his methods being as they are, more simplistic. He ended up just coming in chameleon, and he wasn't to know that the drives that drove this place are just not going to align with his on the whole. And I think he might have realised that, or he might not have realised that, but his exploits over the last few months, where he tried to tie everything off and tried to restrict his friends and restrict their community and their culture and what they did, what they said, where they went, you know, that all speaks of running scared. And so I think he's been running scared since he got here and realised, or maybe he didn't realise, and he's just used to being at that level of just running scared a lot. And it's just an interesting, I just thought about the differences in reasons behind stuff as well. I'm trying to mix it all together now.